Listen, earlier this year, Anna Malika Tubbs, who's currently a PhD student at Cambridge. I don't know how this happened, but while she is a PhD student, she found the time to write a book that I think really needed to be written. It's entitled Three Mothers, and it pieces together what can be known of the women who raised the three black men who most helped to reshape the world in the 20th century: Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. Three women who have been nearly overlooked by history, but whose hearts and minds shaped the civil rights leaders to whom they gave birth, and more importantly, gave inspiration. Now, I'm painfully aware that Mother's Day is not a universally happy holiday for everyone. Sometimes a mother gives a child a head start in life, and sometimes a mother gives a kid something to tell their therapist about for the next several years. Some of them do both. But as Malcolm X said, the mother is the first teacher of the child, and the message she gives to that child is the message that they will give to the world. Malcolm's mother, Louise Little, was an immigrant from Grenada. She spoke several languages, and she taught her children by cutting out newspaper stories and putting them on the kitchen table with a dictionary, and she instructed them to study them, and then she would question them about how different the news story was from what their white teachers were telling them in school. It was their task to be critical thinkers as children. Each of these three mothers who instilled a love of art, poetry, music, literature, and culture into their sons did so because they knew that the world would try, as Sean's song said, to roll them up and stick them in a little square box labeled Black Boy. And each of these mothers wanted them to be bigger than what the world told them that they could be. Barris Baldwin taught her son James, Alberta King taught her son Martin, and Louise Little taught her son Malcolm that they needed to be aware that the culture itself would try to cancel them, try to hold them down, try to limit their potential, but they planted big dreams in their heads. We often remember little Ruby Bridges this way, being escorted into a New Orleans segregated school by white male federal agents as depicted by Norman Rockwell. But the historical fact of her life is better portrayed by the movie about her life, because every day she was walked to school holding the hand of her mother, Lucille. Ruby, as a child, had to walk into an angry crowd of racists every day. Can you imagine that in Louisiana? But she held her mother's hand, and she said that she was only afraid one day. There was a white woman holding a child's coffin with a black baby doll in it, and she was yelling at little Ruby, "I'm gonna lynch you." And her mother looked at that woman and looked at Ruby and said, "That woman's not gonna hurt you. I'll see to it." And Ruby said that she was never afraid again. Martin Luther King's older sister, Christine, remarked, "I have to chuckle as I realize that people actually believe that Martin Luther just appeared, like he fell out of heaven when we needed him." Every great hero of history has mentors, teachers, and for many of them, their mother may have been more than their first teacher. Their mother may have been their greatest teacher. We have a Latin saying in philosophy, ex nihilo nihil fit. From nothing, nothing comes. We are born into a culture, and even though cultures are always changing, as children, we tend to accept the prevailing culture as being the way the world has always been. The status quo is not only the way that things are, but the way that they should be. Now, we can turn to both history and anthropology to try to explain why the world is full of male dominance, why there's so much white privilege, homophobia, nationalism, and the assumption that whatever religion your parents had is the only true religion. But the Irish playwright, political activist George Bernard Shaw said, "The reasonable person adapts themselves to the world. The unreasonable person persists in trying to make the world adapt to them. Therefore, all progress depends upon unreasonable people." If we simply accept the status quo, if we only preserve the culture we inherited, then nothing will ever come of us. Ex nihilo nihil fit. We never produce progress. No one becomes a prophet by trying to preserve the way that things are. Now, I don't want to bore you by just stating the obvious, and I don't want to indict either mothers or fathers who really just want their children to be safe. I understand that I told my little brown daughter how to deal with racism and how to avoid conflict because we want them to be safe. But folks, if you teach your kids to comfortably adapt to a sick society, are you really doing them any favors? If we expect them to not rock the boat, not kick against the goad, aren't we crippling them? Aren't we taking away their potential? Now, my parents wanted me to never embarrass them. That was their largest goal in life, was to fit in a way where you didn't draw any attention to yourself. They did want me to be successful within the confines of a capitalist system where, though they were probably never conscious of it, as a white male heterosexual, I was born on third base. There's no great secret why I got to go to Ivy League schools and I got to travel around the world, because in a lot of ways, even in this era, as a white male straight guy, a lot of people held a lot of doors open for me that they were just not even aware that they were doing it because I was white, male, and straight. But honestly, let me ask you, would you rather raise another Jeff Bezos, who just almost by circumstances falls into being the richest man in the world, or another Colin Kaepernick, largely hated by politicians, decried by the sport in which he played, but who has managed to open the eyes of much of the world and change it? So, you got a little boy at home, Christine. You don't want him to just fit in, do you? Because the world's got a place for him that he doesn't want, and we don't want him there. Now, in my relationship with my Brazilian girlfriend, I'm too old to say girlfriend, my significant other, I'm inheriting these two delightful dark-skinned nieces. I have offered to tutor them in their English classes, and I've decided recently, when school starts for them again and we're doing FaceTime English lessons, that I'm going to read Martin Luther King Jr.'s letter from a Birmingham jail with them. If you're going to learn how to speak English, you ought to learn right where it ought to start. And sure, I know, you don't have to tell me, they're a little young for that, but my mother took me to Bible school when I was younger than them, and let me tell you, I didn't understand a word of it, and a lot of it still doesn't make any sense to me. But for them, in Brazil, which is more racist than the United States, if that's possible, if they don't understand it today, they're going to understand it a little too soon. And it's not just because they have dark skin. I wish that I had read Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail to my white nieces and nephews before they had grown into adults in Kentucky and Alabama. You can infer what I mean by that, but I'm not going to say anything else about them. But it takes critical thinking and courage to find the ways in which culture really does need to be canceled. to be changed, improved, advanced. The media tries to manipulate us through visceral emotions. And I get it. I've written news columns for our local newspaper for years, and they always want me to start not by saying how many houses were destroyed in New Orleans by Katrina, but they want me to talk about one particular family and what all they lost, and pictures of crying people standing over their flooded house. The media thinks that we all think by our guts, that all we can do is have emotional reactions. I love this meme I ran across last week that portrays the hypocrisy of how the political right always tries to use social issues to trigger their control of their base, which are basically motivated out of fear or anger. Now, if you've forgotten already, at the beginning of last month, it seemed like we were having a report of a mass shooting almost daily, day after day, one mass shooting after another. And at the end of the week, the Republicans came out strongly saying that transgendered women shouldn't be able to compete in women's sports. They wouldn't consider anything to lower the number of gun deaths, but they tried to stoke fear in their simple-minded followers, fear of the transgendered. Women's athletics is just the current version of the debate that we were having a couple of years ago about who could use which restroom. And just for the record, there are no known instances in the history of the world of a trans person molesting someone in a restroom. In fact, it is safe to say that the most anxious person in any public restroom is a trans person who is hoping they can just go pee without getting murdered. More than 20 trans folk have already been killed this year just for being trans, one right here in Springfield. How many people then, for comparison's sake, have been killed for being straight? None. Especially when you consider that less than 1% of the population is trans, and by self-reporting, 97% are straight. Realistically, I think we should probably say 90%. If trans people were so dangerous, you'd think you'd hear about trans people killing straight people for being straight, wouldn't you? But that story never shows up in the statistics. It doesn't exist, but there is actually a legal defense used in courtrooms by nervously straight people who kill trans people called the trans panic defense. I got so scared by encountering a trans person, I had to kill them. Men and women, we've just got to stop this. That's a culture that has to be canceled. It's nice having a live audience again after all these months, so let me ask you, ladies who are here, if you're about to get on an elevator and one of these two people is going to be getting on with you, which one makes you feel more creepy? Tucker Carlson or this lovely trans woman? Now, I think being nervous about being alone with Tucker Carlson is a completely rational and defensible fear. But this lady looks lovely, like to get to know her. I'm especially disturbed by the same brand of lawmakers who wanted to subject women who were seeking an abortion to a transvaginal ultrasound, violating women vaginally who came seeking an abortion possibly, if not probably, because they had already been sexually assaulted. And now these same really creepy politicians are wanting to subject female athletes to a visual inspection of their genitals. Folks, is it too much to ask to get Republicans to just leave our private parts alone? Don't look, don't touch, don't insert, just don't. What does your mother really want for Mother's Day? I'm guessing two of the top things would be equal pay for equal work, and for Republicans to stop thinking about their vaginas all the time. Now that, I think, would make for a really happy Mother's Day. The right often cries crocodile tears about cancel culture over such things as Mr. Potato Head becoming Potato Head, and Theodore Geisel's Family Trust deciding to remove some of Dr. Seuss's early work from publication because, like most of the people of his time, he had a lot of unconscious racism in a few of his books. And so nobody read those books anyway, so the Family Trust just decided to take them out of publication. But in both of these cases, there was no one complaining to the toy manufacturer or to Dr. Seuss's heirs to update the catalog. The toy maker and the Seuss Family Trust just realized culture has grown. Culture's changed. We are aware of things that we used to not be aware of. It may be that originally naming sports teams, the Redskins, the Chiefs, the Braves, that may have been more honorific than it was derogatory. But if Native Americans are telling us that our caricature and cartoon drawings of their ancestors used to sell sports paraphernalia, if they tell us it is offensive to them, then we need to pay attention to that. Doesn't simple courtesy say to us, if they don't like it, we shouldn't do it? Their culture, their history, doesn't belong to us to appropriate. When the United Negro College Fund was established, the word Negro was not considered to be racially insensitive. When the NAACP was started, the term colored was not considered to be racially insensitive. But folks, there is so much racism in America that even benign words will become bastardized over time. And an oppressed people will demand respect and recognition from the larger culture, and sometimes that starts by changing the language. The way we talk affects the way that we think. And so it is no surprise that a word that was not offensive 100 years ago, but is offensive now, demands to be changed. I'm still not good at remembering that trans people generally prefer that they be referenced with the pronouns they and them, which in my harshly grammatically trained mind, those words still sound plural and not gender-neutral singular to me. But as you hear in the news every day that trans people are being victimized in state legislatures, in the military, in public restrooms, and now in girls' track meets, we're being asked to change our language so that it will hopefully change the way that we are prejudiced. Getting it wrong and being corrected, as in my case, I need to be corrected repeatedly, that is part of helping culture to become sensitive to the unique needs and triggers often common in an oppressed community. And yes, sometimes that may feel like cancel culture when you are being asked to change to make someone else more comfortable. But do you really want to hold on to your prejudice? If in your heart of hearts you really want to be a better person than you have been, a better person than you are today, then you just have to accept that some parts of our culture that we've been really comfortable with needs to go away. I came of age quoting the famous serenity prayer, God grant me the serenity to accept the things that I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. What I'm saying today is that this kind of very gentle perspective just might be too much of a light hand in the face of a country with as many problems, prejudices, and discrimination as our country has. We are beset by the violence of poverty and a government that defends its entrenched indifference. So I don't use the classic form of the serenity prayer anymore. I have a new one, There are some things, mothers and fathers, that I don't think you should teach your children to accept. I think we should pray, God grant me the serenity to change the things I cannot accept. Give me the courage, the wisdom, and the sincerity to be able to change the world where it needs it the most. We will seem to be unreasonable at first, but who wants to fit in well in a sick society? So have courage, my friends. Challenge the status quo. Question authority. And be just as unreasonable as you think you have to be.
Thank you for watching our videos. We are entirely dependent on the donations of our listeners and members. We hope that you find this content to be important enough to help us to keep offering these videos to the public at no charge by becoming a regular contributor. Please click on the donate button on our website at www.spfccc.org. Thank you for your support of progressive religious programming.